I'm Charlotte, 28 female. I work as an archivist for my city's historical society, a job that most people find painstakingly dull, but that I find deeply fulfilling. My life is quiet, ordered, and revolves around the preservation of stories held within brittle paper and faded photographs. I live in a small but cozy apartment filled with books and inherited furniture, each piece with its own history. My world is one of careful cataloging, of understanding the weight of the past and the importance of protecting it for the future. It's a peaceful existence, and until recently, I believed the greatest dramas in my life were confined to the historical records I managed. I was wrong. The story I'm about to tell you isn't about a forgotten document or a historical artifact. It's about a piece of my own history, an heirloom that was stolen from me not by a stranger, but by my own blood, and the cold, methodical path I took to reclaim it. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the anchor of our family. She was a woman of quiet strength and immense grace, and I adored her. When she passed away 5 years ago, it left a void that I've never quite been able to fill. She left very little in the way of material wealth, but she bequeathed to me the one thing I cherished more than anything, her engagement ring. It wasn't a grand, ostentatious piece of jewelry. It was a modest, vintage ring from the 1940s, crafted from white gold with an intricate filigree design that resembled looping vines. At its center was a small but brilliant cut diamond, flanked by two tiny sapphires, my grandmother's birthstone. To an outsider, it might have looked like a simple, pretty antique. But to me, it was everything. It was the symbol of my grandparents' 60-year love story, a tangible piece of my family's soul. My grandmother had told me the story 100 times. My grandfather, a young soldier just back from the war, had saved up for months to buy it for her. He presented it to her on a park bench under a sprawling oak tree, the same tree where they'd had their first date. She wore it every single day of her life, and her hand never looked right to me without it. The smooth, worn band felt like a direct connection to her, a constant reminder of her love and wisdom. I wore it only on special occasions, terrified of losing it. The rest of the time, it sat nestled in a velvet box inside my jewelry armoire, a secret treasure that I would take out from time to time just to hold and remember. It was more than a ring. It was my inheritance, my history, my promise to carry her memory forward. That promise, I would soon learn, would be tested in the most brutal way imaginable, forcing me to become a person I never knew I could be. The quiet archivist would have to learn to become an investigator, and the loving cousin would have to learn how to deliver justice, no matter the cost to our family. The story of the ring's temporary departure from my life began, as so many family dramas do, with a wedding. My cousin, Madison, was invited to be a bridesmaid in the wedding of a very wealthy college friend. Madison, who was 3 years my junior at 25, had always been what my mother charitably called aspirational. She worked as a sales associate at a high-end boutique downtown, a job that barely funded her expensive tastes and her meticulously curated social media presence. She lived in a world of appearances, where the right dress, the right handbag, and the right accessories weren't just desirable. They were essential armor for the social circles she so desperately wanted to be a part of. Our relationship was pleasant but distant. We were family, so we saw each other at holidays and birthdays, exchanged polite texts, and liked each other's photos online. But we weren't close in the way I was with my older brother, Ethan. Where I was reserved and valued substance, Madison was effervescent and valued style. She was all glittering surfaces, and I often wondered what, if anything, lay beneath. Still, she was my cousin, and I felt a familial obligation to support her. She called me 2 weeks before the wedding, her voice a rush of breathless excitement and manufactured panic. "Charlotte, oh my gosh, you are going to save my life," she began, not even waiting for a hello. "So, you know Amelia's wedding? It's at the grand ballroom. Everything is going to be incredibly fancy, and my bridesmaid dress is this simple, elegant navy color. It's beautiful, but it needs something. You know, a little sparkle, something with class, something with a story. I knew immediately where this was going. My stomach tightened. "Maddie, what are you asking?" "Your ring," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as if she were sharing a wonderful secret. "Grandma Aliner's ring, it would be perfect. It's my something borrowed and something blue all in one. Can you imagine? It would be like having Grandma there with us. She would have loved that." The invocation of our grandmother was a calculated, manipulative masterstroke. She knew how much Aliner meant to me, and she was shamelessly using that love as leverage. I hesitated, the silence stretching uncomfortably over the line. The thought of that ring on anyone else's hand, let alone out of my sight, sent a wave of anxiety through me. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was my most precious connection to the person I missed every single day. "I don't know, Madison," I said slowly, trying to find a polite way to say no without causing a massive family rift. It's incredibly valuable to me. I never let it out of my sight." "Oh, I know, of course you do," she gushed, her voice dripping with syrupy reassurance. "I would be so careful with it. I'd literally guard it with my life. I'd only wear it for the ceremony and the reception, and I'd give it right back to you the very next day. I swear on everything. Please, Charlotte? It would mean the world to me. I just want to feel elegant for one night, and everything I own is so cheap-looking next to what these people wear." Her voice cracked with a hint of what sounded like genuine desperation, a vulnerability that chipped away at my resolve. I pictured her at that wedding, surrounded by people with old money and casual wealth, feeling inadequate. My heart, against my better judgment, softened. Family is supposed to be there for each other, right? Maybe I was being selfish, hoarding this beautiful piece of our shared history in a dark box when it could be out in the world, shining, for just one night. I convinced myself that my grandmother, a generous and loving woman, would have wanted me to share it. She would have wanted to help her granddaughter feel beautiful. "You promise you'll be careful?" I asked, my voice weak. "I swear, Charlotte, on my life," she repeated, the relief in her voice palpable. "You are the best cousin ever. I owe you big time." The following week, she came over to my apartment to pick it up. As I opened the velvet box and lifted the ring, its delicate design catching the light, I felt that familiar pang of love and loss. I held it in my palm for a moment, tracing the looping vines of the filigree with my finger. "My grandfather gave this to her the day he came back from the war," I said softly, more to myself than to her. Madison was barely listening. Her eyes were fixed on the diamond, wide and hungry. "It's so beautiful," she breathed, reaching for it. I closed my hand around it for a second longer, a strange sense of foreboding washing over me. "Maddie, I'm serious," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "This is irreplaceable. It's not about money. It's about Grandma. You cannot lose it." "I won't," she said, her expression a perfect mask of sincerity. "Don't worry for a second." I watched as she slipped it onto her finger. It looked foreign there, a piece of my soul resting on the hand of someone who couldn't possibly understand its weight. She wiggled her fingers, admiring the sparkle. "It fits perfectly. Thank you, thank you, thank you." She gave me a quick, airy hug and was out the door before I could say another word, leaving me standing alone in my quiet apartment with a hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had entrusted her with a promise, a legacy. I just prayed she understood the weight of what she was holding. The wedding was on a Saturday. I spent most of the day feeling a low-grade hum of anxiety, a feeling I tried to dismiss as me being overly sentimental and protective. I saw a few photos Madison posted online from the event. She was beaming in her navy bridesmaid dress, holding a bouquet of white roses. In one of the pictures, a close-up of her and another bridesmaid, I could just make out the glint of white gold and sapphire on her hand. My ring. Seeing it there so far away from me didn't feel right. It looked like a prop in her perfectly staged life. I sent her a quick text. "Hope you're having a wonderful time. The ring looks beautiful." She replied almost instantly with a string of heart emojis. "It's a dream. Everyone loves it. Talk tomorrow." The next day, Sunday, I waited. Morning turned into afternoon, and afternoon began to fade into evening. I had expected her to call or text to arrange a time to drop off the ring as she'd promised, but my phone remained silent. I tried to reason with myself. She was probably exhausted after the wedding, maybe sleeping in late or having a post-wedding brunch with the bridal party. I didn't want to be the nagging, anxious cousin, so I held off on contacting her. But as darkness fell, the hollow feeling in my stomach grew into a knot of genuine worry. Finally, around 8 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore and sent her a text. Maddie, hope you recovered from the wedding. Just wanted to check in about the ring. Let me know when would be a good time for me to get it back. The 3 little dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. The delay made my heart beat faster. Then, my phone rang. It was her. Charlotte, her voice was thick and shaky, punctuated by a sniffle. It was the complete opposite of her usual bubbly tone. My blood ran cold. Madison, what's wrong? Are you okay? A heartbreaking sob erupted from her end of the line. Oh, Charlotte, I am so sorry. Something terrible happened. The most horrible thing. I stood up from my couch, my knuckles white as I gripped my phone. What is it, Madison? What happened? The ring, she choked out between sobs. It's gone. The words didn't compute at first. They floated in the air, nonsensical and unreal. What do you mean gone? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Did you take it off? Where did you put it? I don't know, she wailed, her voice rising in hysteria. I had it on at the reception. We were dancing and it was so crowded. At some point, I went to the ladies' room and when I was washing my hands, I realized it wasn't on my finger anymore. I must have slipped off while I was dancing. We looked everywhere, Charlotte. Me, the other bridesmaids, even the hotel staff. We searched the entire ballroom, the bathrooms, the hallway. We were on our hands and knees for over an hour. It's just gone. It vanished. My mind was reeling, trying to process the scenario she was painting. The chaotic dance floor, the careless flick of a hand, my grandmother's ring flying off into the darkness to be stepped on or swept away with the confetti and champagne corks. The image made me feel physically ill. Grief, sharp and suffocating, clawed at my throat. It was my worst fear realized. I had been its guardian and I had failed. I had let my sentimentality and a desire to be a good cousin override my better judgment. And now, a piece of my grandmother was lost forever in some soulless hotel ballroom. Did you tell the hotel? I asked, my voice numb. Did you file a report with them? Yes, of course, she cried. I gave them my number. They promised they'd call if their cleaning crew found anything, but they haven't. I feel so awful, Charlotte. I know how much it meant to you. I am so sorry. I'll pay you back, I swear. I'll get a second job. I'll do anything. Her promises of money were like salt in the wound. She didn't get it. She couldn't possibly get it. It was never about the monetary value. I ended the call, unable to listen to her performative grief any longer. I sank onto my sofa, the full weight of the loss crashing down on me. I cried. I cried for the ring, for my grandmother, and for my own stupidity in trusting Madison. The next morning, my Aunt Susan, Madison's mother, called me. Her tone wasn't one of apology, but of damage control. Charlotte, dear, she began, her voice smooth and condescending. I heard about the unfortunate business with the ring. Madison is just beside herself with guilt. She feels absolutely terrible. She should, I said flatly. Now, let's not be too hard on her, Susan said, a chiding edge to her voice. It was an accident. These things happen. It was a lovely gesture for you to lend it to her, but jewelry is meant to be worn and sometimes things get lost. It's a shame, but at the end of the day, it's just a thing. Family is more important than things, isn't it? Her words were so dismissive, so belittling of my grief that they left me speechless. She was protecting her daughter, spinning a narrative where Madison was the distraught victim of circumstance, and I was being unreasonable for being upset. The conversation was infuriating. She was making excuses, minimizing my pain, and trying to guilt me into absolving Madison of all responsibility. I felt utterly alone in my grief. My own mother had passed years ago, and my father lived in another state. My brother Ethan was furious on my behalf, but he was busy with a major case at his law firm. The person who should have been showing the most remorse was being shielded by her mother, who was busy trying to rug sweep the entire incident. For days, I existed in a fog of sorrow. I accepted that the ring was gone forever, a casualty of my cousin's carelessness and my own naivety. The grief was a heavy cloak, but underneath it, a small, cold seed of something else was beginning to take root: anger. For 2 weeks, I was adrift in a sea of grief. Every time I looked at my hands, I felt the phantom weight of the ring that should have been there. My apartment, usually my sanctuary of quiet order, felt empty and silent. Sleep offered little escape. I was plagued by dreams of the ring, of my grandmother's smiling face fading away. I would wake up in the dead of night with a hollow ache in my chest, the reality of the loss hitting me anew each time. During one of these sleepless nights, somewhere around 3 a.m., I found myself sitting in the blue glow of my laptop screen. I was doing something that was both painful and compulsive. I was searching for the ring. Not the real one, of course. I knew that was a hopeless cause. I was searching for rings that looked like it. I scoured websites for antique and estate jewelry, typing in keywords like 1940s filigree engagement ring, vintage white gold diamond sapphire, and Art Deco floral ring. I scrolled through page after page of search results, looking for anything that captured the essence of what I had lost. It was a masochistic exercise, a way of torturing myself with ghosts of what could never be replaced. But I couldn't stop. As an archivist, I was trained to search, to find connections, to follow faint trails of information until they led to a discovery. It was an instinct I couldn't turn off. My search terms became broader. I started looking at online auction sites, then marketplaces where people sold secondhand goods. On a whim, I typed pawn shop jewelry database into my search bar. A few national websites popped up, aggregators that allowed pawn shops across the country to list their high-value inventory online to reach a wider market. It seemed like a long shot, but I was wide awake and desperate. I clicked on the first one. The interface was clunky, the photos often poorly lit. I narrowed the search by state, then by city, and began scrolling. I saw gaudy gold chains, flashy diamond clusters, and watches with ridiculously oversized faces. Nothing even remotely resembled my grandmother's understated, elegant ring. I was about to give up, to close the laptop and try to force myself back to sleep, when my eyes caught on a small, blurry thumbnail image. My breath hitched. It was the right shape: white gold, a dark stone in the center flanked by two smaller ones. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I clicked on the listing. The page loaded slowly, agonizingly. And then there it was. The photo was taken against a black velvet background, the lighting harsh, but there was no mistaking it. The intricate, vine-like filigree I had traced with my finger 1,000 times. The specific, brilliant cut of the center diamond. The two small, deep blue sapphires. I zoomed in, my hand trembling as I moved the cursor. And there, on the side of the band, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, was a tiny scratch. A scratch that had happened decades ago, when my grandmother had accidentally scraped her hand against a brick wall while gardening. It was her ring, it was my ring. For a moment, a wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me. It wasn't lost. It wasn't at the bottom of a hotel dumpster. It existed. It was safe. But that relief was immediately consumed by a tsunami of confusion, which quickly hardened into something cold and sharp. I looked at the details of the listing. The name of the pawn shop was one I recognized, located in a slightly seedy part of town about 20 minutes from Madison's apartment. And then I saw the date. The date the item was logged into their system. It was Sunday, the day after the wedding. The blood drained from my face. Sunday, the day Madison had supposedly spent crying, beside herself with guilt, after having searched frantically for the ring on her hands and knees the night before. The day she'd called me with that tear-choked, hysterical performance. But the timestamp on the pawn shop's database told a different story. The item had been logged at 11:42 a.m. Sunday morning. While I had been sitting at home, sick with worry but trying to give her space, she had been standing in a pawn shop, exchanging my family's legacy for a handful of cash. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. There was no frantic search. There was no lost on the dance floor accident. There was only a cold, calculated betrayal. She had planned this. She had targeted me, used our grandmother's memory to manipulate me, and lied to my face with tears in her eyes. The grief I had been drowning in for 2 weeks evaporated in an instant, replaced by a feeling I had never experienced before: pure, unadulterated rage. It was not a hot, screaming rage. It was a cold, quiet, and terrifyingly clear fury. It settled deep in my bones, sharpening my focus and banishing all sorrow. Madison hadn't just been careless. She had stolen from me. She had stolen a piece of my grandmother's soul and sold it, and she had made me mourn its loss while she pocketed the money. In that moment, sitting alone in the dark, illuminated by the digital ghost of my stolen heirloom, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to get my ring back, and Madison was going to pay for what she had done. The quiet, forgiving archivist was gone. In her place was someone methodical, determined, and utterly unforgiving. The next morning, the cold rage was still there, a block of ice in my chest. It had transformed my grief into fuel. I was no longer a victim, I was an investigator. My first call was to my brother, Ethan. As a paralegal, he lived in a world of evidence, procedure, and consequences. He was the logical, steady mind I needed. "Ethan, it's me," I said as soon as he answered. My voice was calm, devoid of the emotion that had choked me for weeks. "I need your help. I found Grandma's ring." "What, you found it? Where? Did the hotel call?" he asked, a surge of excitement in his voice. "No," I said, my tone flat. "Madison didn't lose it. She pawned it. I found the listing on a pawn shop's online database. It was pawned the morning after the wedding." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he processed the information. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tight with fury. "That little? Are you absolutely sure it's the one?" "100%, I replied. "I saw the scratch on the band. It's ours. The shop is downtown. The transaction was logged at 11:42 a.m. on Sunday." I forwarded him the link to the listing. I heard him click his mouse. "I see it," he said after a moment. "Charlotte, this changes everything. This isn't an accident anymore. This is theft. Specifically, theft by conversion. She was entrusted with your property, and she fraudulently converted it for her own use." Hearing the cold, legal terminology for Madison's betrayal was strangely validating. It stripped away the messy family emotions and left only the hard, ugly fact of her crime. "So what do I do?" I asked. "Do I go to the shop? Do I confront her?" "No, absolutely not," Ethan said firmly. "You do not talk to Madison. You do not talk to Aunt Susan. You don't give them a chance to spin this, to create a new lie, or to try and get the ring back themselves and destroy the evidence of the transaction. We need to be smart about this. We need a plan." His professional instincts had taken over, and I was grateful for it. He laid out the steps we needed to take, and I listened, taking notes like I would for a new archival collection. First, preserve the evidence. I took detailed screenshots of the online listing, making sure the URL, the shop name, the date, and the pictures were all clearly visible. Second, establish clear ownership. I had photos of my grandmother wearing the ring, and even a photo of me wearing it at a family event last year. More importantly, I remembered that years ago, my grandmother had it appraised for insurance purposes. I spent the next hour digging through the box of her old documents that I kept in my closet. My hands were shaking, but my focus was sharp. Finally, tucked inside a faded envelope, I found it, the original appraisal from 1995. It had a full description of the ring, including its weight, the cut and clarity of the stones, and its appraised value, which was around $5,000. The amount was high enough, Ethan confirmed, to potentially push the crime from a misdemeanor to a felony in our state. The third and most crucial step was to find a motive. Why would Madison do it? The money, obviously, but for what? A pawn shop wouldn't have given her anywhere near its appraised value, Ethan explained. She probably got a fraction of it, maybe $1,000 if she was lucky. She needed fast cash for something. That's when I remembered her social media. While I had been mourning, she had been posting. I opened up her profile, my stomach churning. Her feed was a glossy highlight reel of brunches, shopping bags, and nights out. I scrolled back to the days following the wedding. There was the bridesmaid picture with my ring on her finger. Then, on the Monday after the wedding, Less than 24 hours after she had pawned my family's legacy, there was a new post. It was a picture of a brand new designer handbag. A very expensive one, the kind that cost well over $1,000. She was posing with it in a coffee shop, the bag placed prominently on the table. The caption read, "Finally treated myself. Sparkle's retail therapy, you deserve it." I felt a fresh wave of nausea. She had sold a piece of our family's history, a symbol of our grandparents' enduring love, to buy a trendy accessory. She had traded sentiment for status, legacy for leather. I sent the screenshot to Ethan. "There it is," he said grimly. "That's our motive. This is premeditated. She knew she was going to do this before she even asked you for the ring. The wedding was just the perfect excuse to get her hands on it." The final step, Ethan explained, was the most difficult. "You need to file a police report," he said gently. "I can go with you. You'll give them all this evidence. The appraisal establishing ownership, the screenshots of the pawn listing, the timestamp, and the social media post showing her new purchase. Once you file the report, the police can place a legal hold on the ring at the pawn shop. That means they can't it secures the evidence and starts the process of getting it back. But Lottie," he paused, his voice softening, "you need to be sure. Once we do this, there's no going back. This will ignite a fire in the family that we might not be able to put out." I thought about Aunt Susan's dismissive words. "It's just a thing." I thought about Madison's fake sobs and empty promises. They had counted on me being a quiet, gentle pushover. They had counted on my grief to blind me and my love for family peace, to make me roll over and accept the loss. They had fundamentally misjudged who I was. "I'm sure," I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "Let them burn." Walking into the police station the next day felt surreal. Ethan was by my side, carrying a neatly organized folder containing all our evidence. I felt strangely detached, as if I were observing a scene from a movie. The officer who took our report was a middle-aged woman with a kind but no-nonsense expression. I laid out the story for her, my voice even and measured, just as I had practiced. I presented the facts in chronological order, the way I would organize a historical timeline. The loan of the ring, the lost story, the discovery online, the pawn date, the new handbag. I handed her the appraisal, the photos, the screenshots. She listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence I provided. "You have a very strong case," she said when I had finished. "The appraisal proves ownership, and the pawn shop transaction, timed with her social media post, establishes clear intent. We'll contact the pawn shop immediately and place a hold on the item. A detective will be assigned to your case and will likely contact your cousin for a statement." She looked at me with a hint of sympathy. "Family disputes are the worst. I'm sorry you're going through this." Leaving the station, I felt a strange mixture of resolve and dread. The official process had begun. The gears of the legal system were grinding into motion, and Madison was about to be caught in them. Ethan treated me to lunch afterwards. "You were amazing in there," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You were so calm and collected. I'm really proud of you." "I just feel cold," I admitted, "like all the sadness has been frozen out of me." "That's okay," he replied. "That's your armor right now. You're going to need it." He was right. The legal side was in motion, but that was only half the battle. The other half was the family. I knew, without a doubt, that as soon as Madison was contacted by the police, she would run straight to her mother. Aunt Susan would then launch a full-scale campaign against me, painting me as a cruel, vindictive niece who was trying to ruin her poor, innocent daughter's life over a simple mistake. They would twist the narrative, gaslight, and try to turn the entire family against me. I couldn't let that happen. Madison didn't deserve a private, quiet reckoning. Her betrayal was audacious, and its exposure needed to be just as dramatic. She had used a family event as the pretext for her crime. It was only fitting that she be exposed at one. "Aunt Susan is hosting her annual family dinner in 2 weeks," I said to Ethan, an idea forming in my mind. "Everyone will be there. Dad is flying in, our cousins from out of state, everyone." Ethan looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face as he understood my implication. "Oh, that's diabolical, I love it. A public forum." "She lied to all of us," I reasoned. "She let the whole family think she'd made a careless mistake. They all witnessed my grief. They all need to witness the truth." And so, the plan was set. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To my family, I was still the grieving, quiet Charlotte. I answered Aunt Susan's occasional perfunctory texts asking if I was feeling any better with noncommittal replies. I knew she was only checking in to make sure I wasn't making waves. She and Madison had no idea a storm was coming. Privately, I prepared for the confrontation. I went over the timeline, the evidence, the sequence of events, until I could recite them in my sleep. I wasn't preparing for an argument, I was preparing for a presentation. I was the archivist, and this was my collection. Each piece of evidence was an artifact, and I would be the curator who explained its undeniable meaning. The detective assigned to my case called me a few days before the dinner. He informed me that they had officially recovered the ring from the pawn shop. It was now being held as evidence, but he assured me it was safe and would be returned to me once the case was resolved. He also confirmed they had spoken to Madison. According to him, she had initially stuck to her story about losing it, but when presented with the evidence of the pawn shop transaction, she had crumbled and admitted to pawning it, claiming she had panicked and was always going to buy it. Back for me, it was another pathetic, self-serving lie. The detective saw right through it. Charges were being filed. Hearing that Madison had confessed to the police only strengthened my resolve. She had admitted her guilt to strangers, but she had yet to face her family. She had yet to face me. The night of the family dinner arrived. As I got ready, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same, but I felt like a different person. The soft-hearted girl who had cried for 2 weeks was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that sometimes, preserving a legacy required you to be ruthless. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, dark dress. I wanted to be the calm center of the hurricane I was about to create. I was ready. The stage was set for justice, and the curtain was about to rise. Aunt Susan's house was exactly as I remembered it, immaculately clean, overly decorated, and smelling faintly of potpourri and ambition. The low hum of conversation filled the air as family members mingled, drinks in hand. I greeted everyone with polite smiles, accepting sympathetic pats on the arm from cousins who had heard about the lost ring. "So sorry to hear about that, Charlotte," one of them said. "Madison must feel just awful." I just nodded, a quiet "she does," being my only reply. I saw Madison across the room, hovering near her mother. She was wearing a brightly colored dress and laughing a little too loudly at something someone said. When she caught my eye, her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She gave me a small, hesitant wave. She looked nervous, which I knew was because the police had questioned her. But she clearly assumed I knew nothing of it, that her secret was still safe within the family. Aunt Susan shot me a tight, forced smile before turning back to her conversation. They were a united front of denial. Dinner was a loud, boisterous affair. We all sat around the long, polished dining table, passing platters of food and catching up. I ate slowly, methodically, a silent observer in the lively family drama. I listened as Aunt Susan boasted about a recent real estate sale and as Madison recounted a story about a demanding customer at her boutique. She was performing, playing the part of the carefree, charming girl, and she was good at it. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at me when she thought I wasn't looking. The main course plates were cleared, and Aunt Susan brought out a decadent chocolate cake for dessert. Coffee was poured, and a comfortable lull settled over the table. This was the moment. The stage was perfectly set. I cleared my throat, and the small sound was enough to draw a few eyes. "Aunt Susan, the dinner is lovely. Thank you for hosting us all." "Of course, dear," she said, beaming. I took a sip of water, my hand perfectly steady. "I actually have some wonderful news I've been wanting to share with everyone," I said, my voice calm and clear, carrying across the table. "It's about Grandma Aliner's ring." A sudden, tense silence fell. Aunt Susan's smile froze on her face. Madison, who had been lifting a forkful of cake to her mouth, stopped midair, her eyes wide with panic. "I know you all thought it was lost," I continued, looking around the table, making eye contact with each family member. "And I was heartbroken, but as it turns out, it wasn't lost at all. I found it." A ripple of confused murmurs went through the room. "You found it, where?" my uncle asked. I turned my gaze directly to Madison. Her face had gone pale. "That's the interesting part," I said, my voice deliberately neutral. "It was at a pawn shop downtown. Imagine my surprise when I saw it listed on their website." Aunt Susan jumped in, her voice sharp. "A pawn shop? Well, for heaven's sake, someone must have found it at the hotel and sold it. That's wonderful news, Charlotte. Now we can get it back." She was trying to seize control of the narrative to provide a plausible, innocent explanation. "That's a nice theory, Aunt Susan," I said calmly, "but it's not what happened." I reached into my purse and pulled out a few folded pieces of paper. My evidence. I placed the first one on the table. It was a high-quality printout of the pawn shop listing. "This is the listing. You can see the ring quite clearly." I then placed a second piece of paper next to it. "And this is a copy of the pawn ticket information provided to me by the police. The transaction took place at 11:42 a.m. on the Sunday after the wedding. The name of the person who pawned it is right here." I pushed the paper toward the center of the table. "Madison." The name hung in the air like a death sentence. A collective gasp went through the room. Madison looked like she had been punched in the stomach. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. "Now, Charlotte, hold on," Aunt Susan snapped, her face flushing with anger. "This is a misunderstanding. Ray trying to embarrass your cousin. There has to be an explanation. Madison, tell them." All eyes turned to Madison. She looked from her mother to me, her expression crumbling from panic into a pathetic display of tears. I was going to get it back," she stammered, her voice a weak whisper. "I just needed some money, just for a little while. I was going to buy it back before she ever knew." "For what?" Ethan's voice cut in, sharp and prosecutorial. He had been silent until now, letting me lead. "What did you need money for so urgently, Maddie?" I didn't wait for her answer. I placed my final piece of evidence on the table. A printout of her social media post featuring the designer handbag. "Was it for this?" I asked quietly. "Did you sell our grandmother's legacy for a purse?" The sight of the photo of her beaming with her new purchase while I had been at home crying was the final, damning nail in her coffin. The family stared, horrified. The full scope of her deception, the lies, the manipulation, the sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it all, was laid bare on the dining room table. Aunt Susan tried to protest, to call me cruel and vindictive, but her words were drowned out by the palpable shock and disgust in the room. Madison just sat there, sobbing, not out of remorse, but out of the humiliation of being so thoroughly and publicly exposed. "A police report has been filed for felony theft," I said, my voice resonating in the stunned silence. "This isn't a family squabble anymore. It's a criminal matter." The unmasking was complete. There were no more lies to hide behind, no more family ties to manipulate. There was only the ugly, undeniable truth. The dinner party was over. The aftermath of that dinner was exactly what Ethan had predicted: a firestorm. The evening ended in chaos. My aunt screamed at me, calling me a monster for humiliating her daughter and destroying the family. Madison was led away by her father, still sobbing hysterically. Some family members rushed to console them, buying into the narrative that my public reveal was crueler than Madison's initial crime. Others, however, came to me and Ethan, their expressions a mixture of shock and quiet support. They saw the cold, hard facts I had presented and understood the depth of the betrayal. The fault lines in our family, which had always existed just beneath the surface, cracked wide open that night. In the weeks that followed, the family officially fractured. Aunt Susan and her side of the family cut off all contact with me and Ethan. They launched a smear campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I was a cold-hearted liar who had set Madison up. It was pathetic and predictable. But for every person who took their side, there was another who reached out to me, offering their support and expressing their disgust at what Madison had done. I learned who my real family was, and it had nothing to do with shared blood. It had to do with shared values: honesty, integrity, and respect. The legal process moved forward, slowly but surely. Given the overwhelming evidence and her confession to the police, Madison had no choice but to accept a plea bargain. She was convicted of a felony, sentenced to 2 years of probation, ordered to complete 200 hours of community service, and forced into court-mandated financial counseling. She also had to pay full restitution for the appraised value of the ring, a debt that would likely follow her for years. She avoided jail time, but her life was irrevocably altered. A felony conviction is not something you can easily hide, and the glossy, curated world she had worked so hard to build came crashing down. Her boutique fired her, and her social media presence went dark. About 2 months after that fateful dinner, I received a call from the police department. The ring was being released from evidence. I could come and pick it up. My hands trembled as I signed the paperwork. The clerk returned with a small evidence bag. Inside, nestled in a piece of cotton, was my grandmother's ring. It looked smaller than I remembered, but just as beautiful. I took it home and cleaned it carefully. As I slipped it onto my finger, it felt different, heavier. It was no longer just a symbol of my grandparents' love story. It now carried the weight of this story, too, a story of betrayal, of justice, and of my own transformation. The ring was a survivor just like me. It had been stolen, sold, and reclaimed. Its journey had added a new chapter to its history, a chapter that was now part of my own. My relationship with Aunt Susan and Madison is non-existent. I have no regrets about this. I realized that their vision of family was conditional, built on a foundation of keeping up appearances and enabling toxic behavior. They didn't want a family. They wanted an audience that would applaud their performance. I chose to walk away from that theater of lies. My bond with my brother, Ethan, is stronger than ever. He stood by me, guided me, and trusted me every step of the way. He is my family. The ordeal taught me a painful but valuable lesson. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I had been raised to be the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over. But there is no peace in tolerating disrespect. There is no honor in quietly accepting betrayal. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the integrity of your family's legacy is to fight back, to demand the truth, and to let the ashes fall where they may. Today, I wear my grandmother's ring often. It doesn't sit in a dark box anymore. It shines on my hand as I work, a constant reminder of where I come from and the strength I discovered within myself. It represents the love of my grandmother, the integrity of my grandfather, and the fierce resolve of the woman who refused to let their legacy be sold for the price of a handbag. It's my history, and I am its proud, unyielding guardian.